The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tony Holowitz, and I want to thank you for being here for this free webinar that I've been putting on. As a longtime ACT teacher and consultant, I have decided that this year I'm just going to reach out to people by introducing myself through a series of free webinars just to try to give people a sense of some of the things I've learned about ACT through the years. And hopefully some of these things that I convey to you will teach you how to make more out of ACT. You know, one of the things that I always tell people is ACT is just software. And the real trick for most people is trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this software do the most for me with the least amount of effort and the least amount of time? And I think people find that can be tricky or challenging at sometimes. So these tutorials, or webinars I should say, will hopefully give you some insights to some of the things that I've learned through time, some new things, some old things, and some things just through experience. So having said that, this is my ACT Top 20 Tips webinar, and I invite you to see some of my other webinars, but let's get going. First and foremost, just a little bit about me. You can reach me via my website, tonytheteacher.com. Again, tonytheteacher.com is an easy way to reach me. I also have a website that offers ACT tips and resources. It's called 365acttips.com. Also, I teach all kinds of things, and I have a lot of free computer training and a lot of resources at my website, teachandolddognewtricks.com. And that has computer training in a wide variety of topics, including QuickBooks, Microsoft Office, which includes Word, Excel, Outlook, and PowerPoint. I'm a web designer. That's a little bit of my creative outlet, so I do some web design using WordPress primarily, and I know a little about a lot, so I'm a good resource. As you being an ACT user, my experience has been a lot of you are small business people using QuickBooks, having websites, and you've got to pull all this together. And what you're going to find in one of the tips that I show you today or talk to you about is things just get a little more complicated with ACT with some of your options with it. And you'll see that as we go along. If you decide you like my style and you'd like to work with me in the future, the way I start working with people is I give everyone an hour of my time for free. So if you haven't taken me up on my offer, take me up for a one-on-one tutorial where you can tell me a little bit about ACT and your ACT story, and I can try to give you some best advice. And what happens is you just get to know me a little bit, and I'm here as a resource should you ever need me. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to me to ask for an hour free. I would really enjoy that. So let's jump right into tip number one. And tip number one might surprise you a little bit. And my tip is this: ACT will not make you more organized. And a lot of times when I say that to people, they're really shocked by that. But let me explain what I mean by that. Many years ago, I attended a conference, and the conference was, they had a speaker there that talked about computers. And he said something I never forgot. And again, this was probably close to 20 years ago. He said, you know, people are getting computers and they think computers will keep you more organized. He said, they won't. He said, if you're disorganized before you get a computer, you're going to be disorganized after you get a computer. The real trick to working with computers is to have a certain level of organization that you can take with you so that when you start using a computer, you can implement that organization. So through the years, I really have seen that. When I work with people that are using ACT, the people that have the hardest time working with ACT are the people that are frankly disorganized, not organized. So a lot of times what I spend time on is just getting them to be organized. And the way I get them to think about that is this. And that leads to tip number two. I tell them to completely forget about ACT. You know, the problem with software is when we get software and we start looking around at the software, we see a lot of shiny things. We see a lot of things that are unique or cool or interesting, and we get curious. So we start looking at things and saying, oh, wow, it does this, and it does this, and it does this. And the problem is, once you sort of get into that mindset of looking around, my experience has been that's when you start running into problems. So one of the best things you can do to get towards that level of organization you need is to completely forget about ACT. What I tell people all the time is, look at an ACT from your perspective and say, okay, what is it I need to do for my business? What is it I need to do to be productive? And that really leads to tip number 3. You know, shut the ACT down, grab a piece of paper, and start writing down your goals. What are your goals? If you have goals, if you can convey to me, for example, your goals, I can help you use ACT as a tool to help you implement those goals. So I always tell people, make a plan, be organized. If you have a business where you have to do consistent phone follow-up, one of the questions I'm going to have for you is, okay, how often do you want to call people? Who are the people you want to call? Are they clients or are they prospects? Is it a combination of both? What is your plan? Write it down on a piece of paper. A lot of times we can look at your plan and we can look at the number of contacts you have in ACT, whether it be 20 or whether it be 20,000, and do a little bit of reality check with that plan. So the goal here is to make sure that you have goals, because if you have goals, then we can use ACT as a tool to help you stay on top of those goals. A lot of times I tell people, make a Monday plan. There are certain things that typically we have to do every week. You know, we might have to look up some of our key clients and say, okay, what do we have to do for them? That can be part of your Monday plan. And I believe this should all be down on a piece of paper. Have a Monday plan. Make a list of all the things you're going to do every Monday. Also, in addition to that, there are some things you don't have to do every Monday, but you want to be aware of at least on a monthly basis. So I always tell people, have a first Monday of the month plan. Now, it could be Wednesday, it could be Friday, it could be Saturday. It doesn't matter to me, but the key here is that you have an organizational thought process that you look at a minimum every Monday and also once a month. So when you have those goals, I know I'm going to make you touch every aspect of those goals at least weekly and most likely at a minimum monthly. So having a Monday plan is a real goal and a real first step in getting organized with ACT. Okay, so that's some general information just based on my experience that I find when working with people, if I get that stuff out there first and get them to think in that mindset, ACT can be more productive. So the next thing about ACT, the most important field in ACT, in my opinion, is the ID status field. Now, when you look at ACT, ACT has all kinds of fields. They have fields where you have the contact, they have, company name, title, department, and you can customize this to add things to it. So when you look at ACT and you put all this information in, the field that I feel is most relevant is the ID status. And the ID status is, right here. So that's the ID status. And the ID status should be fairly simple. For most businesses, if you think of it in the most simple terms, we have contacts in here. The two contacts or types of contacts that are most vital are our clients and prospects. So for just a moment, if you thought about this and you said, you know what, we have nothing else but those two, what I want you to be able to do is I want you to do a lookup of all your prospects very easily and all your clients very easily so you can do something with them. So those are the two most important things. And when it comes to the ID status, I try to keep it incredibly simple. And also, I try to make sure there's no contact in ACT that does not have an ID status. Because what good is a contact in here if you can't find them quickly? And a lot of times we need to find them not based on who they are, but what they are. And the ID status is the first line of defense to make sure you're organized and you have your contacts. For example, let's say you were going to move your office. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to look up all your clients and in one fell swoop send them all an email saying, by the way, I'm moving, and give them your information? That's why the ID status is so vital. If you have contacts in here that you have no idea who they are, you're disorganized. You're not going to find the people that you need. ID status is vital. And I'm going to expound on that a little bit more in another tip. The next tip, tip number 5, is I want to talk to you about the second most important ACT field. And in my opinion, that field is the last email field. The last email field, as you'll see right here in the middle of the screen, you'll see there's a field underneath latest activities and it says email. What this does is it tracks the last time you sent an email out. Now, on that note, there are some minor exceptions to this, but having stated that, if you send an email from Act, and most of the time when you send an email from Act, it's going to go out via Microsoft Outlook. Not all the time, but a lot of the time, it's going to go out through Microsoft Outlook. Let's face it, as small business people, isn't it nice to know that we can reach a lot of people quickly via email? I mean, if I need to say something to my clients or my prospects, I'm not going to sit there and call them. It's just much too time consuming. But I can send an email out to hundreds of people very quickly. But the last email field for most of us is the way we're going to most often communicate with people. And if our goal is to communicate, say, every 30 days, this last email field will tell me the last time I reached out to people. And because this field is searchable, I can find the people that I have and have not reached within a given period of time. So the last email field, I think, is the second most important field in ACT. And if you're not utilizing this, if this is not part of your ACT layout, then it should be. Next, my next tip is tip number 6. Now, there's a lot of talk about when is it appropriate to upgrade your ACT software to the most recent version. Never forget, ACT is a software company. They make money selling software. Now, don't get me wrong, as an ACT certified consultant, I can sell software, but I don't want you to think of me in just those terms. Really, what I want you to think of me as is the person that is going to help you get the most out of ACT with the least amount of effort and cost. So on that note, there are times when I recommend upgrading and there are times I do not. What has become sort of sexy, what's become sort of the in thing right now, is being able to access ACT via any device and any computer. That's what ACT Premium Cloud is. They've introduced a new subscription model that allows you to access ACT on your smartphone, on a tablet, on an iPad, anywhere and everywhere. In addition to that, one of the things that I don't think do a great job explaining is that when you have ACT in the cloud, which is what the subscription service is, you can also have ACT on your desktop. So if you want to work on the desktop all the time or 80% of the time, no problem. It keeps all that information updated with what's the cloud. So for that 20% of the time you might travel, no problem. Or if you're out of the office or just want to look at it on your phone, you can do that. Now, on that note, there are some things related to upgrading, and I always say it's price versus cost. ACT Pro, which many of you use, is only a couple $100. If you bought ACT Premium, their more expensive version, it's almost $500. So for most of you, that's not even an option. ACT Premium Cloud is approximately $400 a year. So let me compare apples and oranges. ACT Pro is $199. ACT Premium Cloud is $400 per year. ACT Pro is $199 once. So why in the world would you want to upgrade ACT Premium Cloud? Well, as I mentioned before, it's in the cloud, so you can access it from many places. But in addition to that, you get free ACT technical support. You get free upgrades. So yes, you pay every single month, but you're in it for the long haul. That's really what you want to think about. If you have technical issues with ACT, you can get support for nothing. Now, typically to get support, you have to pay for it, and most of us charge in the range of anywhere from $100 to $150 per hour for support. So you've got to weigh that. Now, having said that, when you get free technical support, I liken it to the following. There are technicians at ACT that can fix things, but they can't necessarily teach you how to make the most out of the software. So you want to be careful of what your expectations are for getting free technical support. Free technical support is great for things that are broken or just in need of repair. Think of it like your car mechanic. But I'm more of the driving school instructor. I'm going to teach you how to get places using ACT. So there are pros and cons to all of these things to think about. This right here that we're looking at is ACT Premium Cloud. This is what it would look like in a web browser. When you use the cloud, there's some things that I want you to be aware of, and there's one thing that I want you to be very aware of because this is going to change a lot of things. ACT introduced just recently ACT version 18.1. With that version comes something called API. What does that mean? It means that ACT can work with other software. So for example, if you have a website and you collect information through a web form, that information can be pulled directly into ACT. So that's an example of it. Also, when you're working with ACT in the cloud, ACT is always backed up. They're backing it up for you. And as I mentioned before, it's on your desktop and you have lower IT costs because of the fact that you don't have to pay for anything. So my tip here, my general tip about the cloud is you can't just look at it based on the price alone. You've got to look at it for what it will do for you and keep some of your other costs down. Technical support, really cheap. Part of it, upgrades, it's not an issue. So there's a reason for it in some cases, not for everyone, but feel free to ask me about that. And I'll try to give you my best advice. Tip number 8, size matters in the cloud. A lot of times people will get it in the cloud thinking, hey, I'm going to have this on my phone and it works great. But the problem is this, your iPhone or your Android device is small. So what happens is when you go to look at it on your device, it's going to look different than it will when you look at it in the cloud. It's going to be different. They adapt this software for the smaller devices. So you're not always comparing apples and oranges, and you just want to be aware of that. Okay, tip number 9. One of the things that I like about having ACT on an iPhone, which is what I have, is that it gives you the ability to dictate things such as email, and you can also dictate your notes and history. Now, there are tools built into devices such as phones that allow you to dictate information. So if you take detailed notes, if you need detailed information, a lot of us are better speakers than we are typers. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just dictate into the notes section of ACT or the history section of ACT what it is that I need to make a record of. It's a lot quicker for most of us. Okay. There's also a tool called drag and dictation, which you can do some things with as well. So you can do that either on your desktop computer or on any other device. So one of the things that I think you want to think about for tip number 9 is ACT now has the ability through different ways of using it to start dictating things via your voice instead of having to type things. And it might make data entry simpler for you when you start to come to the realization that you can do some of these things with ACT. Tip number 10. Now earlier I had said something about the ID status. And I said, the key here is to make sure that the ID status really looks at clients and prospects. Let's face it, if we're in business, those are the two most important people in our ACT database because we need to always follow up with clients. We always need to be on top of prospects, continuously marketing. So at a minimum, the ID statuses that you create should be simplified, but the two most important ones are clients and prospects. Make sure that you're using the ID status in such a way that those are easy to find and easy to work with. When I talked about the most important field in ACT, the ID status, I told you I'd come back to that with this tip. ACT has the ability to have what are called required fields. So let's say you enter a new contact. You get a business card and you start entering the contact in. Well, what happens is this. I recommend strongly that you make the ID status a required field. And the reason I recommend that is because by doing that, you can now make sure that you never forget to fill in an ID status. Those two that are key is note, are they a prospect or are they a client? Who are they? Now I'm simplifying for the sake of this discussion. There are some other ID statuses that I recommend, but I'm keeping it at that just so you get my drift, get my point on this matter. Make it simple, make it required, and that way people will never slip through the cracks and ACT if you have some of this information put in properly. Tip number 12 is layouts. Okay, depending on the nature of your business, you can modify your Act layout to look like anything you want. So here's sort of a standard layout. It's almost like a business card. But there are all kinds of ways you can modify the layouts. And a lot of it is you got to get creative. But at the same token, you want to make sure you don't get too creative so you become a data entry manager. Sometimes if you have to put too much data in, it becomes counterproductive. So let me give you an example of some of the types of fields you can put in. These fields are all labeled by the type of field they are. So you have character fields, just simple text. That's all it is. Currency, it keeps tracks of money. Date field, time, decimal, email field, initial caps. Initial caps are great if you're a bad typist and you want to make sure when you type in Tony Holowitz, you make sure that the T and the H are capitalized. Or you can make it all lowercase. You can do all kinds of things here. But the one that I like the most is down at the bottom on the left-hand side is what's called a yes-no checkbox. And the yes-no checkbox can be very effective because it's very visual and easy to see and work with. On the right-hand side, we have a memo field, which is just a free-flowing field where you can put information that you want it to really hit you in the face. Instead of having to dig through the history and the notes of a contact, this is information you can put right there. Okay, and it can just hit you in the face. We can make the font size bigger. We can do all kinds of things to really make it stand out. Also, you can put a picture in here. So if you have a picture of your contact and you want to put a name with a face, you can do that. You might be able to get someone's picture off of a site such as LinkedIn, but this is just a picture or a photo. So that's one example. Next, the checkboxes, which I mentioned earlier, try to imagine for a moment you're in the ice cream business and you got to keep track of all your contacts and their ice cream likes and dislikes. Well, over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see I have all kinds of checkboxes. The checkboxes, when they're empty, are false. When they're checked, they're true. And you can literally just with your mouse click on each one that you want to click off. So for example, if you were trying to find all the people that like butter pecan because you might have a lot of butter pecan in stock and you want to, run a sale or make people aware of it, you can do a lookup of all these fields. And the thing I like about it, it's very visual. When I'm looking at Tony Holowitz, you can say, oh yeah, he likes vanilla, chocolate, cookies and cream, mint chocolate chip, check them off, and then those fields are searchable, which is a great thing. Tip number 14 is this. Don't be a database manager. Don't make your data so complicated that you're spending more time entering data than selling. That is a huge mistake. Keep it simple. And sometimes this is hard for people that like to keep a lot of information. My feeling is this. Communicate with people and don't waste a lot of time entering data and not having the time to act on what you're putting in. Tip number 15 is something that I call group therapy. Groups in ACT are great, but a lot of times people use groups wrong. If you don't know what groups are, groups can be created so that, for example, let's say I do a lookup of all the people whose first name is John. Well, I can create a group called people whose first name is John and put all those people in there. But the way you should use groups is with something called group membership rules. And what group membership rules do is automatically populate groups based on criteria that you deem important. So it's a way to easily find things and find people that are relevant. When I was talking about the last email field, if you said to me, I want to email people every 30 days, I can create a group that is called prospects that have not received an email in 30 days. And it will find anyone with the ID status of prospects, anyone whose last email field is greater than 30 days. It will automatically populate them. So groups are a great way of staying organized for that monthly Monday plan or even the first Monday plan, the weekly Monday plan. I use it all the time to help my clients make sure they accomplish what they want to accomplish. Tip number 16, love email, embrace email, learn all about it because as a small business person, it's the easiest way for us to communicate. Learn about all the different email techniques, learn about Outlook, Swift page email, Act email marketing, learn about it all. Really go out of your way to learn this because it's a great way to communicate. And again, I'm one of these people that believes don't over communicate, but there's a line there. Got to figure out what that is, but really get good at email and all the options you have there. Tip number 17 is histories versus notes. A lot of times when we're talking to a contact, we might put notes in. What I'm going to tell you here is I always recommend to my clients never use notes, always use something called histories because it creates some other information in ACT that allows you to get information back out. Also, in ACT, there's a tool there called companies. Let's say, for example, you have 10 contacts at the ABC company. Well, you can create what's almost like a group where it takes all those 10 contacts from that company and groups them together. It's something called companies. What I really wish ACT had called it is something like summaries, because if you look at the ABC company as a company, then you can see a summary of everything that's happened with all the people at that particular firm. So it's a great thing to get to know a little bit, and it can be used properly if you think it through a little bit. Next, add-ons for ACT and Outlook. One of the things I always tell people is if you think there's got to be an easier way to do something, a lot of times there is. ACT, for all intensive purposes, is an inexpensive off-the-shelf piece of software. It has limitations. But if you have limitations or you're trying to do something, there are all kinds of add-ons, some free, some you have to pay for, that will do things for ACT and also for Microsoft Outlook that I can turn you on to that will make you better at what you do when using ACT software. Tip number 20 is this. Just remember that I offer 1 hour free. Whether you're a salesperson, sales manager, if you do consulting, or if you have to train your staff, I can help you. I'm more than happy to reach out to you and try to give you my best advice specific to what you do. So consider booking me for a free hour. I'll do an online meeting with you. You can tell me your ACT story and you can give me all your insights on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I in turn turn around and tell you how I work. You can book me past this free hour if you want, but I can be booked for 5 minutes or 5 hours. It does not matter to me. I want to be a resource for you when the timing is right. So ladies and gentlemen, that is my ACT Top 20 tips. I run through a lot of little things there that I think are relevant to you becoming a better ACT user. And now the trick is turning the attention on yourself and trying to take some of these ideas and thoughts and try to make the most out of ACT. Never forget, ACT is just a tool, and the better organized you can be, the more you'll make out of ACT. And that's what I really try to help people with. I want to thank you so very much for being here today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the phones for questions and see if anyone has any questions. Don't be bashful. I'd be more than happy to try to help you out. So if you don't have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time and have a great day.